Welcome to Buckeyes Tomorrow Morning for Thursday, October 2nd. I'm your host, Tom Orr. The Minnesota game in 3 days, the game against Michigan in 59 days. We're going to be talking today to Ross Fulton, our X's and O's guru, and when Ross is on the show, we are sponsored by Jeff Ruby's of Columbus, proudly offering nationally acclaimed USDA prime steaks, seafood and sushi, impeccable service, live entertainment, and an attention to detail that is simply unmatched. Just go to jeffruby.com/Columbus to check out the menu and make a reservation today. All right, so we're going to be talking about the Ohio State offense today and their performance against Washington, and it was good eventually. They had some stuff that worked. They had some stuff that didn't. One of the things that's been a big topic of conversation after that game is, are the Buckeyes using too many tight ends? That has not traditionally ever been the problem with Ohio State's offense, but it seems, there's at least some conversation that it might be part of an issue this year. 11 personnel, 12 personnel, 13 personnel. When does it become too much? We're going to be talking about that with our buddy Ross Fulton. Ross, I guess that's the first question. Is there too much? Are they leaning too much on the multiple tight ends in the run game? Is that one of the reasons they're struggling, or do you not really buy into that?
I think they're overdoing it. I think in this game they were in at least two tight ends over 50% of snaps. I mean, I don't quite have the same numbers on three tight ends or more, but that had to been another, of that over 50%, another 15% maybe. And I just think it's bringing too many, it's bringing a lot of people into the box on the edges that's not necessarily getting blocked, and that's causing, people crashing off the edges. It's sort of throwing off pullers in terms of reading what's going on. I think there's a place for it. Certainly the two tight ends, there's a place for it. I mean, I think between Will Kazmarek and Max Clare, they obviously offer different skill sets. Kazmarek's a really good blocker. I thought Clare probably had his best game as a blocker in this one. And obviously Clare has the receiving threat, and they have a lesser receiving threat from their third wide receiver. So it makes sense in that regard. But I just think there's too much of anything, right? And I think they should cut down. So ironically, for all the multiple tight end sets, the most success they had running the ball was this look, which is 11 personnel, and they sort of use this short motion to run stretch the boundary, which is always everyone's favorite. And I say that obviously tongue in cheek. It's a split zone. They split zone it, but the backside, the tight end is sort of kind of sifting and filling on the backside safety. And you can also see in this clip that this is Washington's game plan. I was surprised myself. I'm sure that they were probably a little surprised. Ryan Walters ran a ton of cover 3, which has not been his MO in the past. A ton of this spinning down. So here you can see the field safety spinning down. They ran a ton of cover 3 both ways. Cover 3 strong, cover 3 the weak side, getting an eighth hat in the box. Because obviously Ohio State's game plan was to come out, get pretty heavy, and run the football. And as you said, they had some success. I'm not saying they didn't, but this is it could be somewhat of a formula going forward, particularly if Clare can block adequately, get a little bit more spread out, create some space for the run game. The Ohio State run game generally, I would say, is it's the success rate is decent. They're not creating anything explosive out of it. It's basically, I guess you would say, it's people are getting kind of what's blocked up. I think there are quite a few missed cutback opportunities. There's missed cutback opportunities. That includes, as we'll discuss, from Bo Jackson. I think he missed some holes. I think he seemed to overemphasize going to where the designed hole was, as opposed to using his vision. Could be a result of, this is what, I would say, the first real opportunity where he's sort of the lead guy in a legit game. And so that could have some of it to do with it. So, just like Julian Sayin we'll discuss, there's obviously going to be some growth there. But they're just leaning very heavily on a run game that's not particularly explosive. And so that's what you get, sort of these drives that are sort of plotting, for lack of a better word. They're not being stuffed, but they're also not, it's certainly much more of a grinded out, both in terms of the pace and the yardage gained.
Well, and this next play that you've got is very much an example of all of that. They're not exactly stuffed, but they are very much grinding it out. This is just Bo Jackson kind of going into the middle of the line and not finding a whole lot there, getting kind of what's there, but not anything else.
Yeah, exactly. And obviously not to say he didn't have some good runs. I mean, that same stretch play I just showed, that 3rd and 17 before the last touchdown, the same exact play that he gained 16 and a half yards on. So, still solid performance. But as you said, so we're back. We're in 12 personnel. They're running, just inside zone. And as I said, like, it's blocked up pretty well. But, as I said, like, again, Washington's in cover 3. The backside safety comes down. So Washington has an extra hat in the box, which you can see from the backside. I think, again, Jackson sort of, I would say, missed that cutback there that would have at least led to a few yards. This is still, I think, 3 or 4 yards. So as you said, not bad. But the bigger point is that, like, by doing this, Washington was running all this cover 3 with really soft 3 deep shell behind it. And there were just so many RPO opportunities post snap. And early on in the game, I have to think that those reads were not live, if I had to guess, because I don't think Sayin has seemed reluctant to pull and throw them. But, like, for instance, here you have this backside glance RPO to Smith. Like, if he throws that, there's a chance that's a 75-yard touchdown for Smith, catching that on the run. And there were just a lot of those on those first couple of drives where I thought if he was truly reading it and pulling and throwing the RPO, Smith might have had 200 yards receiving in this game, because there's just a lot of these backside opportunities. And we'll see, like, as I'll show next, like, part of what sort of opened things up, obviously first drive, they go down, they get stopped at the 5. The 4th down play, you talk about, like, it was a lead outside zone. Again, it gets back to this multiple tight end conversations, right? You're using your freshman Nate Roberts as a fullback, and, like, he blocks Jelani Thurman's guy. I think it's a tough thing to ask, like, a tight end who doesn't play fullback to sort of read where the hole is, because he has to read it too, right? As the lead blocker, like, where's the hole developing? Where's that play side linebacker going to be to block? And so he missed it. CJ Donaldson, again, it's too high, running, like, in short yardage, and they get stopped there. Then they punt on the second drive, and then once they sort of take the shackles off of these RPOs, then that's when they get the offense going.
Well, and this next play is an example of that, where instead of handing it off, you pull it and you take not that everything's going to go 75 yards, but if you can get 8 yards at a chunk, that's going to keep you on schedule in virtually every situation.
Exactly. And some of these that were 3 and 4 yard runs in the first couple series turned into these, like, 8 to 9 yard pass plays. And, that was the difference. I mean, there was at least 4 or 5 of these RPOs. And again, so Washington, Ohio State's in 12 personnel. So they have both their nickel down, then their backside safety. They're in cover 3 weak again, spinning down. So Ohio State's running GH counter with this backside comeback route, right? So, like, safety comes down. There's all that space from the boundary corner, and Sayin pulls it and hits Smith. So the play was blocked up fine, actually, but obviously, you're just, if you're going to get these bodies in the box, and, like, your quarterback's not a run threat, as we talked about, like, you're going to have to do something. So I tend to think back to your initial question about the tight ends. Like, I think their offense, just given where their strengths is, namely in Smith and Carnell Tate, like, are your best players. I'd rather be getting the ball out wide to them than just, like, trying to get in tight and, man ball everything and take those guys off the field. But so once as I said, once they started using this kind of started to open things up, and give them opportunities. They did this to the backside, they did this to the front side, but it was a pretty glaring difference between this. And, they ran this exact same concept on the second series, handed it off, and got, like, 2 yards. So, as you said, the difference between 2 yards and 9 yards adds up.
Well, and before we get to the next one, I do want to ask you, I had this thought, and I've had this thought in previous years as well, where they'll load up with the tight ends and they'll take Jeremiah Smith off the field in the goal line, or they'll take Carnell Tate off the goal line and off the field in the goal line. And I understand you're getting more blockers in the box, but then you're getting more defenders in the box too, because that, if you have Jeremiah Smith out wide, at least one and possibly two defenders are going to go with him. So it feels like, yeah, I understand the math with more blockers, but also if you can take people away from the ball, you might be able to run it better if the defense is more spread out at the goal line. I mean, where do you land on that? Is that something where, I get sometimes you're going to load up in a goal line formation, but do you agree that there's maybe some value in keeping some of those wide receivers on the field?
I do. And again, I guess obviously you have to trust your quarterback to make those throws like we saw against OU. Like, if you get Smith singled up in those situations, then you have to be able to pay it off. Right. But the trade-offs are those heavier formations. You're spreading out where we talked about like the defense. If the quarterback's under center, turning and handing off, right, the defense is going to have you outnumbered. So if you got multiple tight ends, you're spreading out where that unblocked defender can come from. You are you're making it so you can run to either side of the formation a little easier versus being in the gun, having multiple receivers. So there are trade-offs. There's some benefits to it. Obviously, they did a nice job. Later in the game, they kind of got in that offset halfback formation, and they handed it off to Donaldson there, like get him a little quicker into the line of scrimmage. I thought after that fourth down run, he also got his pad level lower again, which he needs to do if he's going to be the short yardage back. And then they obviously threw the play action off of that same formational look, or not even play action, but just the sprint out in the flat to Donaldson for the last touchdown. So there's obviously things you can do both ways, but I just tend to agree. I mean, I think right now the biggest issue, and we'll talk about this with the passing game, as I said, is the lack of explosiveness out of the offense. The efficiency is pretty good, but there's not like the explosiveness, and I'm not sure they're going to get it from the run game like they have in the past. And so, anytime, if I'm an opposing defensive coordinator, anytime you see, I think, Jeremiah Smith on the sideline, you got to probably be happy with that trade-off.
Well, the next one is one where Jeremiah Smith was not only on the field, but Jeremiah Smith was the only guy who was going to get the ball. This is kind of interesting where the ball is very clearly going to Jeremiah Smith, and you can tell that because everyone else on the field is blocking. There are wide receivers that are kind of out in routes, and they are blocking. This was very clearly designed to go one place and one place only, and that place ended up in the end zone.
Yeah, as I said, I mean, Ryan Walters really kind of shed his stripes, at least his traditional stripes for this game. Like, very, as we talked about last week, like very heavy man coverage guy. And in this game, he ran like basically two things, which is like cover three, like a soft cover three shell, get or like 3 high Tampa 2. But this was the one play he didn't. Ohio State got him for it, and so they're in a cover 0 here. It's 3rd and long. Bringing the pressure. This is a traditional situation where you bring cover 0, blitz, force the quarterback, and this is just a nice play call. This is actually a screen pass, as you said. So in college football, as long as that shallow stays behind where the ball is snapped, I think Jeremiah Smith does that here. Everyone can go downfield and block, right? And so you're basically just getting depth and buying time to set up Smith on that shallow, where then you allow the rest of your receivers to block their counterpart in cover 0 down the field and creates a touchdown. So nice design in this situation, and catching Washington in the right situation.
And one of the things that sometimes it's hard to tell when you're watching the game on TV or in person is, you're watching the ball, you're watching the quarterback, and you're not necessarily able to see all the receivers downfield. So if Julian Sayin is holding the ball in the pocket, is that because guys aren't open or not? And one of the great things about the All-22 is you can see, and there were several times when he had guys open and didn't pull the trigger, and we're going to look at a couple of those to wrap it up.
Yeah, I think this was the big question coming out of the game was like, was Ohio State not trying to push the ball downfield? Was it what Washington was doing with the zone coverages I discussed? It was taking it away. By my count, I think there were 4 or 5 instances where Ohio State called vertical routes, all verts, 4 verticals, 3 verticals, something that was trying to get the ball downfield. There were opportunities to do so, and Sayin didn't take them. Now, I do think there were times where the pass protection maybe broke down a little bit. I would not say it was like the cleanest game of pass protection I've seen from the Ohio State offensive line. But I do think Sayin was like a little quick also to exit the pocket. So like, here's our first example, right? So here's Washington in their 3 high Tampa. So we've talked about this with Ohio State defense, right? You got your pull runner there and the 2 guys. We've got 4 verticals concept from Ohio State. So against cover 2, the 1 vertical breaks off because you want to get 3 against 2 deep. And so he goes sort of on a dig route. And I just think, I mean, to the field, I think, you have Bryson Rogers up the seam, and then you have the whole shot to Colonel Tate, which is, between the cornerback and the safety. Sayin looks that way at first, you can see from the closer in view, but then quickly comes off and goes back to Jeremiah Smith to the boundary, who gets pushed out of bounds. I mean, I think not understandably so. There is a tendency for Julian Sayin right now to look at Jeremiah Smith as a security blanket, like when in doubt. But I thought he came off opportunities here. Now, he dumps it off again. Like both these clips we're going to show, like he dumps it off. Like we don't get behind schedule. They don't, have a negative play. So it's not like all bad again, like, which sort of explains, they had 7 drives. They had 1 stopped on downs at the 5, 1 punt, 3 touchdowns, a field goal, and then the end of the game. So again, like it's pretty efficient offense. You're just missing these opportunities for explosiveness, which I do think they're going to have to get going forward. I don't think it's a question. There's a debate there's a question of can Sayin physically do it with his arm strength versus does he just need to pull the trigger? And I lean in the latter category. Like I've seen him, he throws a nice deep ball. I don't think there's any question that he has the arm strength to hit these throws to the field. I just think he just needs to be more decisive. And I just think first game on the road, being conservative, probably a little jittery in the pocket. And so it's just something that's going to have to develop going forward.
And then this last one, this is one that I'm sure Julian Sayin did not love watching in the film room, because this is one where Jeremiah Smith's running a little bit of an out and up, and it's like, boy, that's one where you probably want to put that ball out there and let him go try and do what he does, because for as often as he was double covered, he was kind of almost not covered on this one.
Yeah, and again, so to me, I think he has multiple guys open here. This is a 4 vertical, so against cover 3, again, you're getting 4 versus 3, right? So when we talk about coverage beaters, this is not defendable by 3 deep defensive backs against 4 vertical routes, right? And so you have Jeremiah Smith and Colonel Tate to the same side, and for my money, you could throw either of those routes. You could hit Tate up the slot towards the hash marks, or as that corner, as you said, as that corner then tries to make his way towards Tate, you have Smith on the out and up. And again, I think you could argue he felt the pressure breaking down on him. He's getting some interior pressure. He's kind of getting happy feet in the pocket there a little bit. And, he dumps it off. And again, it's so you're staying ahead of schedule. It's not going to hurt you, but you're just missing opportunities. And I said, big picture wise, right now, the Ohio State offense, I think in SP Plus is down to 16th. They played Texas that game. They really sort of turtled it. So, statistics can kind of this early in the season be a little off, but they're just SP Plus in particular is going to punish them for the lack of explosiveness, because that's what that metric is based on. But that's just where what they need. And I just think it's going to have to come from Sayin getting more comfortable in the passing game, because that's where your 2 best players are on offense. And I don't think as I said, I wouldn't be counting on the run game necessarily to get it from where the running backs are at this moment. I think they need those 2 and Max Clare. I thought he was open multiple times on sort of similar seam routes, that they're just going to have to, as Sayin gets more comfortable, get him to the point where he's ready and willing to pull it and hit these throws.
All right, so there's your look at the Ohio State offense against Washington. We'll get to the Ohio State defense against Washington coming up with Ross a little later on in the week. And when we do, we will once again be sponsored by Jeff Ruby's of Columbus, the award-winning upscale steakhouse in downtown Columbus, named one of the top 50 steakhouses in America by Food Network. Just go to jeffruby.com/Columbus to check out the menu and make a reservation today. That will do it for today. Thank you guys all for joining us. Have a great day. We will talk to you tomorrow.